Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the investment webinar organized by Aranda Pharma. My name is Milla Koistinaho. I'm a co-founder at Aranda and a member of the board of directors and an advisor in company's drug discovery and development activities. Tonight, I'm moderating this event and discussion. Aranda is a growth stage biotech company that develops a Finnish invention for the benefit of patients suffering from a nasty skin disease, acne. In order to succeed in this mission, Aranda is fundraising via investors' crowdsourcing platform. This gives you all a possibility to participate in the financing round with the same terms that have already been negotiated and agreed upon with professional investors. A significant amount of money, 400,000 euros of anchor investments, have already been secured from existing shareholders that are professional investors as well as from the management of the company. On this funding round, which is open until the December 30th, Aranda is seeking financing up to 1,050,000 euros. In this webinar, the managing director of Aranda, Anu Muona, will introduce the company as an investment target and tells you more about Aranda's acne product and the current funding round, and answers the questions that you all can present on the chat box of this webinar, together with the chairman of the board of directors, Mikko Mannerkoski. Then a few words about the practicalities of this webinar. After Anu's company presentation, we will spend about 15 minutes discussing several topics that are relevant for the crowdsourcing round and support you in the investment decision making. Thereafter, Anu and Mikko will answer the questions that we have received ahead of this webinar from the registered participants, and you still have a chance to present your questions in the chat box. This webinar is recorded and will be made available on investors' website for later use. Before I let Anu to start with the company presentation, can you briefly tell the audience, the listeners of this webinar, that how it all actually got started? Where does this acne innovation come from?
Sure, it comes a few years back when we were working together, you remember, with our chemist colleague in a Parkinson's disease drug discovery project, and we realized that a structural element in that project and in those compounds could have some activity in hormones, especially as an anti-androgen. And that invention or realization led to a total 55 patents filed altogether thus far, and founding of Aranda, and also yes, one day I hope we will have a new drug for acne in the market.
Excellent, Anu. So please go ahead with your company presentation.
So acne has significant impact on quality of life and self-esteem of the patients. It is not a life-threatening condition, but if untreated, severe acne can lead to permanent damage, acne scars. With the next few slides, I will go through why to invest in Aranda. I will tell you about clinical and commercial possibilities of the acne market. I will tell about the role of androgens in acne and how our product fits into this acne treatment landscape. I will tell you about our business model and path to value creation. And finally, I will say a few words about the return of investments. There are three pathways leading to development of acne. Sebaceous glands produce sebum in excess in acne. Thereafter, together with that, bacteria multiply, and together with sebum and some debris, clog the pores, which often leads to inflammation of the skin. In addition, there is abnormal keratinization, which means thickening of the skin and shedding of the skin cells, which is a typical feature for acne. Androgens have a role in inducing the sebum production and the link of excess sebum production in acne and in the development of acne has been known already for decades. And now I will show in an animation what happens. So sebaceous glands excrete sebum. There are bacteria that multiply and together with sebum block the pores in the skin, and inflammation follows. When talking about acne treatments, the term topical is often used. It means that treatment is applied directly on skin as a cream or gel containing the medicine. When treating skin diseases like acne, topical treatments, of course, are an important option. Of the 3 pathways leading to acne, androgen-induced oiliness is poorly addressed. There are drugs targeting abnormal keratinization. These are called vitamin A derivatives or retinoids, and there are both topical and oral options to target this symptom. Inflammation can be treated with antibiotics. Again, there are both topical and oral alternatives. Androgen effects can be inhibited by anti-androgens, but there are mainly oral anti-androgens on the market, and these are associated with side effects. Thus, there is a high medical need for topical, locally acting anti-androgens like ADA308. Acne is a major market in dermatology. Over 80% of all people experience acne, typically during their teen years, but for some it is a chronic disease continuing in the adulthood. There are more than 630 million acne patients in the world, and also the acne medication market is valued $8.6 billion US. And of this, the market for prescription medication is about 5 billion. About 65% of acne drugs are topical, meaning that they are applied to skin as a creams or gels, which makes sense when we are treating a skin disease. Then a summary of our product, which we call ADA308, and how it is suitable for treating acne. So first of all, we have confirmed that ADA308 can be used in topical application, meaning that it can be used as a cream or gel in future. It penetrates the skin, but it acts only locally in the skin, meaning that it does not enter circulation, which is very important in this drug class, anti-androgens, as we do not want anti-androgenic side effects in men. This also means that we can treat both men and women with our ADA308 compound. ADA308 compounds are pure androgen specific. They don't have any other hormonal activities. This is very important, and it differentiates us from some competitors. They are well tolerated, in contrary to some acne medicines like retinoids, which are known to be highly skin irritating. And they have global patent protection till 2033, which is extendable till 2043. A few words about our team and business model. We have an experienced core team with professional drug developers and a board that has a track record for deal making. We will discuss this shortly more. Depending on the development status of the program, special know-how is acquired from advisors or consultants, specializing, for example, in preclinical regulatory study design or clinical trial design. Such know-how is acquired on need basis, which is a cost-effective way to work. We do not have our own laboratories, but we collaborate with professional service providers in drug development. We have an established network in place. For example, for drug manufacturing, we use Jubilant, which has been our partner for many years already. Actually, we use the same service providers as other pharma companies, including the big ones like Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson. Then about the value creation path, which is quite extraordinary in acne. The estimated costs for finalizing the preclinical development is approximately 2 million euros. This will be financed by equity investments like those collected during this ongoing round. In addition, we will apply for non-dilutive governmental loan to finance these studies. Showing efficacy in patients is the major value inflection point in drug development. In acne, the path to clinical trials, that is patient studies, is short and developmental costs are low compared, for example, to cancer programs. The estimated cost for these studies in acne is approximately 2 million euros, whereas in cancer programs it can easily be 10 million. Our goal is to look for a licensing partner once we have demonstrated efficacy signal in patients. The value of the program is at that point a lot higher than, for example, at the end of the preclinical phase. Finally, to conclude why Aranda is an attractive investment opportunity, we have a cost-effective and flexible operating model and hence low fixed costs. As mentioned, our goal is to look for a developmental partner while our product is still in the clinical development. The likely partner is a global pharma or biotech company with whom a licensing deal is made. The deal will mean that Aranda and its investors will gain return in form of upfront payment at signing and milestone payments as the program advances in the clinical development. These payments are typically tens of millions of euros. Once the drug is on the market, which we estimate may occur at 2026 at the earliest, depending on the developmental strategy of the partner, royalties will be paid based on the net sales. At this point, I would like to point out that when you look at the material at the investor website, also pay attention to the risks described.
Thank you very much, Anu. Next, we will discuss a few topics related to this investment decision making. So maybe I'll start with Mikko first. You are the newly appointed chairman of the board of directors at Aranda. We are very grateful for having you as part of the team, as you are well-reputed, well-known serial founder, I can say. Serial founder behind many successful life science and drug discovery / drug development companies, including Rapta Therapeutics, Tenboron, or US-based Neutron Therapeutics. So actually, what triggered your interest in Aranda right now? You are not only devoting your time for the benefit of the company, but also investing serious money yourself on this round.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So as some of the listeners may know, or the viewers may know based on the materials, I'm one of the so-called anchor investors in the round, alongside Investor Funds, which is a well-known Finnish venture investor, and Palkki Group, which is another well-known a big family office that does a fair amount of life science investing. So obviously I've had to consider fairly carefully.
Do your homework.
Yes, and I think there's a couple of points that I'd like to sort of outline here, and bear with me. I'll go through all of them. I'm sure I'll get to the end. The first one is that I'd like to kind of bring up is the fact that acne is a really interesting clinical opportunity, and of course that translates to an interesting commercial opportunity. Anu touched upon this in her presentation, but there actually has been very little innovation, kind of medical innovation, new pharmaceuticals coming to the market for acne, in decades, and that translates to a clear, unmet medical need that is there, and then that translates to the commercial opportunity. And there are also some recent transactions that point to the same direction. We can talk about these later, perhaps. Then the other point is that the role of the androgens in acne is not disputed in science. It's kind of settled science in the sense that it is known that by pharmaceutically affecting androgens, you can treat acne. And so that's a good starting point. So there's no kind of validation of the target that we have to do.
Solid basis.
Exactly, as opposed to some other projects that are out there. Then thirdly, Aranda has completed the so-called discovery phase of the program, and what that means is that typically in drug development you start with a multi-year program where you basically develop your compounds, your so-called medicinal chemistry, and you go through a lot of variants of the molecules in an effort to kind of pinpoint the molecule that you want to take to the clinic and such. Aranda has already done that, so we have the molecule. So and obviously we will benefit from that in the future. And then as a fourth point, and I think all of the kind of previous ones basically lead to this, is that unlike in development drugs for some other diseases in some other classes of pharmaceuticals, the path to kind of the next major value inflection point is actually quite quick, relatively speaking, and cheap, again, relatively speaking. And what that means is, as Anu explained, is if everything goes according to plan, it's basically 2 years and 4 million euros to get to a point where we have the first efficacy signals in human trials, which should give us the opportunity to then transact the assets. So meaning either license the technology to a larger pharmaceutical company who then brings the product to the market, or sell the company. And I think all of this put together, if I needed to kind of distill this in one line, is that I think the risk-reward ratio is kind of good here. I mean, there are risks, obviously, but I think they are kind of, they're reasonable, and the risk rewards are nicely balanced here. So that would be my short answer.
What a long one would be. No time for that now. But maybe next one to Anu. What differentiates Aranda's product from the competing products?
Yes, there is a competitor on the market, and that is clascoterone. It has FDA approval, so market approval only in the US thus far. When we compare clascoterone to our compound, clascoterone is a hormonal structure, so it is impure in that sense that it also hits other hormonal receptors. It has activity in other hormonal pathways, whereas our compound is pure anti-androgen. It does not have any other hormonal targets in the body, so that's the main thing.
Hitting only the androgen receptor,
yes,
AR.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Can some other companies start developing exactly similar product than Aranda has?
No, that is not possible, because we have a patent protection, global patent protection, wide protection for big group of compounds, different structures around surrounding that structural space. So it's not possible to develop similar product that we are developing.
To come even close?
No,
that
not
is
at all.
blocked.
No.
All right.
Chemical space is so large.
Thanks. Then a question about Aranda being, let's call it a tiny biotech, situated here up north. What makes us succeeding kind of reaching the market, the drug market, which is highly demanding and highly regulated as well? So,
yeah, you're absolutely right in that pharmaceutical business, in the grand scheme of things, is obviously controlled and done by large pharmaceutical companies with a lot of kind of capability in bringing drugs to the market and distributing them and selling them. I'd like to point out, however, that we are not kind of strictly speaking in that business. So our business is to develop the innovation that we have, and then when we have what we think is sufficient proof of of efficacy and sufficient data to back up the concept. We will then go out and find a pharmaceutical company that will take on the project by either in-licensing that against fees, of course, and royalties and such, or by acquiring Aranda. This is a very typical biotech model that thousands and thousands of biotechs work based on globally, and this is the model that we're going to follow. And in that game, it doesn't really, well, of course, what resources you have is important and it still matters there, but even more important is the innovation and what you have, what data you have, and as I said earlier, we have what appears to be a very promising molecule, a really potent anti-androgen. We know that by affecting androgens in acne, you can treat the disease, and so I think there's a clear path forward for us to a point where we can transact the company to a bigger pharmaceutical company.
So the likelihood of getting kind of a licensing or a co-development commercialization agreement with another company bigger than us is more dependent on the quality, strength of the data and the intellectual property rights than the size or the location of the company. Am I right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, I'm just repeating myself a little bit, but I think the beauty of this case, as I went through it, kind of thinking about my own investment, is that the path to that point is not very long. It's a couple of years, and the monies that are required to get there are not exorbitant. They're like roughly 4 million euros. So this is for anybody working in biotech. These are short timeframes and small monies.
Speaking of money, you mentioned that word. Can you estimate what is the size of the market potential of Aranda's product?
Yeah. This is requires a slightly subjective answer in that an efficacious pharmaceutical product or drug, it kind of creates a market for itself. So, there are a few examples in the world where you have an innovation coming to a sector where you have a demand for new drugs, so meaning there's something lacking in the current therapeutics, and all of a sudden the market kind of increases in size because you have a new drug that is efficacious that many of the patients then start using. And so, with that in the background, we have tried to, let's say, gauge with, more or less imperfect kind of reference points what the top sales of a product like this might be. And I think there's a couple of metrics there. So we can look at some of the other non-androgen affecting pharmaceuticals that are used for acne, where you have products that sell north of or more than 1 billion a year. I think the closest comparator would be a product called clascosterone, which is a more broadly affecting hormonal, basically a skin cream, a topical product that is in the market in the US and has certain characteristics that we believe are ultimately undesirable, and we think that our molecule is better. That the top sales or the peak sales of that are estimated to be around 400 or 500 million per year. So that just gives you a flavor of how big a class of pharmaceuticals their acne is, and it's an interesting indication, interesting kind of pharmaceutical class from the point of view of larger pharmaceutical companies. So that means that if we are able to demonstrate the efficacy signal, we should have ample opportunity to then license the asset.
Do you have any concrete examples of transactions where smaller companies would have been bought by larger companies in dermatology area?
Yeah. Well, actually, the company that developed clascosterone that we just talked about, that was an Italian company called Cassiopeia Pharma, was purchased by a larger pharmaceutical company just some months ago for, I think, somewhere between 300 and 400 million, which goes to show that also smaller companies can command high values in the space.
Great, thanks. Then a few words about Aranda's team. You briefly, Anu, mentioned in your slide presentation that we have a competent core team, but can you tell more about it, and especially when it comes to our capabilities in drug discovery and development? But not only that, also can you tell the audience about our experiences in pharmaceutical licensing or fundraising?
Yeah. So if I start about the drug development, so I have been working with the ADA308 program since its inception, so I really know all the phases it has gone through, all the molecules that we have been studying. Actually, it is really a large program of more than 600 designed structures, meaning molecules, and more than 200 of them have been studied for their efficacy or some drug-like properties. So so it is really a big program, which of course is good in that sense that if we need to at some point to look for some other molecules, there is a library of molecules we can have a look. And yes, I have been working in non-clinical drug development thus far 13 years. So Mikko, you can continue from...
Yeah, maybe add to that just a couple of kind of anecdotal metrics. So actually, Anu and I were just counting in our heads on during the break here that the team has, according to our calculations, been involved sort of directly hands-on in at least 47 drug development projects, stemming, ranging from really early stage research projects all the way to basically working on drugs that have gone to the market, which is actually quite rare.
Quite a span.
Yeah, it is. And then from another perspective, I think this is more a more rough estimation, but we think we've worked with or around maybe 50, 60, 70 licensing deals that have been concluded between biotechs and pharmaceutical companies internationally. So there's a fair amount of expertise on the topic.
Excellent. The time flies, and I'm afraid we have to move on to our next section in this webinar, which is the Q&A. And thanks everyone for sending us your questions ahead of the webinar. You still have a chance to ask Anu and Mikko through the chat function. I'm reading the chat box here, but let us first take some of the questions that we received actually earlier already. I'll start with this one. Why have you selected a crowdsourcing over a directed share issue to professional investors? Mikko, do you want to?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, well, actually we haven't. So we are doing both. And what I mean by that is that we have sort of two elements here in this fundraise. We have the anchor investors, including myself, who are professional investors in life sciences. So again, Innovestor funds, who are a well-known venture capital firm here in Finland. We have Palkki Group, who are a family office, known for their life science investment activity, and myself, alongside Anu, of course. And so we are providing, the roughly, I think, good 400,000 of the capital that we are raising here. However, we felt that it would be, quite natural to expand this a bit to tell to tell the story of Aranda to other investors, private investors, offer them an opportunity to become a part of our story. We think that the story should resonate amongst people, because I'm sure that basically all of us know people who have suffered from acne and have kind of at first or second hand understanding and experience of how unpleasant the disease it is, despite it not being life-threatening. So we're trying to combine both.
Thanks. Then next one, where is the IP located?
Yeah, it's held by the company.
Yeah.
So all of the IP is fully owned by the company. There are no kind of we're not due any license payments or revenue share with anybody. It's fully owned, unencumbered, and ours to deal with.
Yep.
Thanks. Will ADA 308 be a prescription drug or over-the-counter product?
It
Anu?
will definitely be a prescription drug.
Prescription drug. Thanks. Then let me see.
I think there's a question on the tax loss carry forwards there, if I see correctly. So if I take that sort of very quickly, because in detail, but I think it's an interesting detail. So there are some millions of tax losses that we can benefit from in the future once we start getting income. However, what I'm hopeful is that will be insignificant, and what I mean by that is that since acne is an important kind of pharmaceutical commercial opportunity, then, and if we are able to show the clinical efficacy signals that we are aiming to obtain, then the licensing transaction and the money is kind of associated with a deal like that, they should overshadow the value of the tax loss carry forwards.
Excellent. Well, then a question related to the risk management of the company. So, Anu, you already mentioned that Aranda has a vast number of compounds in its possession and even characterized quite well in different models preclinically. But the question is that, do you have a plan B in case ADA 308 does not progress as anticipated?
Yes, we have a plan B. I think that is a common practice in drug discovery programs, that you need to have a plan B, really. Our plan B is, like I mentioned, that we have these other compounds, library of compounds, that we can have a look if there is something that, for example, of course it depends on what kind of problem it is that the program is not advancing, whether it's the safety issue or whether it's lack of efficacy. We can have a look at some other compounds we have already characterized. Another thing is, of course, that we can look for other indication which has actually described in the material, which is a hair loss, that is a androgen-dependent indication like acne. So that is a natural way to move forward if something comes up with acne.
Can I add to that very quickly?
Sure.
from a slightly different perspective? Kind of going back to what I said earlier about the risk and how I think they're kind of in control and reasonable, taking into account the potential, the financial potential here. I think it's again very important to kind of note that in addition to the clinical commercial opportunity, again the target that we are after has been broadly validated in science over many decades. So unlike in many other drug development kind of instances, we don't have to do target validation. We know that the target is there. We know that if we are able to hit the target, as the jargon goes, then that should have a beneficial kind of therapeutic outcome and hence efficacy. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that we have the molecule in our hands, and thirdly, we have what we believe is a short path to showing the human proof of concept. So all of these things put together, I think they kind of, as a cocktail, they mean that the risks are not zero, but they are under control and they are reasonable, and actually the financial outlays to kind of get to the point of proof of concept is fairly low. Having said that, like Anu also explained here already, one of the most important jobs of management and board in a biotech, in a drug development company, is to think of the kind of scenarios, think of backups, think of what to do if something is delayed and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Excellent. Then a question that does it cause problems in the liver?
Well, this is a compound that we will be applying on the skin. So it is a topical treatment, and typically topical treatments are not that big safety alarms when especially if there is no systemic exposure, meaning that the treatment does not enter the circulation. So yes, I would say that there probably wouldn't be any liver problems based on the topical application that we use as a route for this compound. Actually, that is the reason why if you show that your compound doesn't enter the circulation, also the safety studies are a little bit lighter for these compounds, because you don't have to look deeper in the body. It only stays in the skin.
Good, thanks. Then the next question in the chat box is that when is the product on the market?
If I take that, yeah. So yeah, that depends on the plans and strategies of our partner, because as I explained earlier, and we explained, our strategy is to license this asset, this technology, to a large pharmaceutical company once we have obtained the proof of concept tentatively in the next 2 years, by end of 2023. So that is from the kind of product market entry point of view what is happening. Now, from kind of financially, from our perspective, the timing of the product entering the market for consumers and for patients is important, but it's sort of secondary, because the strategy being to out-license the asset or to sell the company after we have the proof of concept in 2 years. It means that, especially in the licensing case, a lot of the economic value that comes to us in that transaction is actually realized at the signing. And so if we just look at some of the comparators on the market, I think we can assume that all of the monies and then some would be basically obtained through the deal kind of immediately, and then it will be followed by typical milestone payments and royalties on product sales and such. So for us, the important point of time is, and the important value inflection point is when we have human data, and then we have the ability to transact the asset.
Good. Then the next one is that when do you achieve the break-even?
Well, that actually, if I continue, since I think it's kind of almost a variation of the previous one. So I think that again, if we are able to out-license the asset after we have proof of human efficacy and the signal, that out-licensing deal should come with, if we look at the comparators in the market, should come with a signing fee and also other associated payments that basically, immediately kind of, bring us over break even and then some.
Excellent. I'm mindful of time here now. Maybe one more question. This is with regards to the likelihood of success in clinical development. So the question is that how likely do you think the clinical trials will succeed in the intended timeline?
That's a good question. Again, going to the risk, just from my perspective, and as I've looked at Aranda, I think we have good building blocks there. So again, we have the target that is validated. We have a molecule, so we are past the so-called discovery stage. We have the molecule. We are kind of going into what in drug development is called the development stage, and so these uncertainties I think have been are controlled for, and again we have a very clear path, clear plan to get to the human efficacy that can be done in a relatively short time, and with human trials that don't involve thousands of people. It can be some tens of people, maybe 50 persons on such. I won't go into the details as to why that is the case, but in our instance that should be the case, to get the first signals of efficacy. So there are actually not a huge amount of kind of places where, as opposed to some other drug development processes and projects, where things could go wrong here. And of course, this could be a topic of an hour, long kind of discussion, because there's a lot of detail there. But maybe I'll just point to a kind of an anecdotal reference point, which is clascosterone, which is in the market. I mean, we talked about it earlier today or tonight. Is in the market in the U.S. It's not a pure anti-androgen, specific anti-androgen as our molecule. So we believe that it has kind of undesirable properties that our molecule doesn't have. But still, it's a topical skin cream, working against hormonal targets in acne. And that has demonstrated in humans efficacy enough to get it an approval from the US authorities, meaning the FDA. So I think that kind of also encourages us in thinking that the concept actually not only kind of scientifically and from the basic science perspective, but also very practically in the biotech and in the clinic, has been partly validated by others. And so I think that's again an encouraging sign for us. So
it paves the way for clinical development strategy for us.
That's what we believe, yes.
Excellent. Many thanks, Anu and Mikko, for explaining Aranda and its acne product. And it was a very interesting discussion. Thanks for your answers. Maybe before we conclude this webinar, we will still once more reiterate the key investment considerations. Mikko, do you want to do that?
Sure. Yeah. I think I began with I can't remember how many points there were.
Now only 3, please.
Few, but now the short version.
Yeah.
So a couple of points. So the first one is that it's an important, interesting, and large clinical opportunity, and that translates to a large commercial opportunity. That's the point number one. Point number two is that the target has been validated, and what that means is that the role of the androgens in acne is well known in science. So we don't have to establish that; it's known already and has been known for many years. So that's number two. Number three is that we have a molecule in our hands. So we are past the kind of molecule finding, so-called discovery phase, which typically is highly risky in drug development. We have the molecule that we want to run with, to use that expression. And I think kind of all of this then translates to us having a relatively speaking, a short path to the proof of concept, having the efficacy signal in men in our first clinical trials, and also not having to spend an excessive amount of money to do that. So 2 years, 4 million is the estimate to get to that point. And I can tell you that, for example, in oncology, in developing cancer drugs, where I've founded several companies, the monies are just completely on another level there. So I think this is one of the reasons why I was and I'm so interested in Aranda, that I think so that relative to the potential, the risks are actually quite nicely balanced.
Excellent. And finally, Anu, can you tell us how the audience, the listeners of this webinar can participate in our financing round?
Yes, please go and visit Investor website. There is more material you can study, and the minimum investment is 500 euros.
Thanks very much. Thanks, audience. Thanks for attending this webinar. Go to Investor website and learn more about us, and have a good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.